Hey everyone, it's Ben Hardy here, and in today's video, I'm going to be talking about the EcoDiesel and how Ram is canceling the EcoDiesel. Before we get into the video though, as always, if you're going to save time and money the next time you purchase a car, link to my car buying guide in the description down below. Let's get into it. So yes, Ram is in fact getting rid of the EcoDiesel powertrain. January of 2023 is when they are just canceling production on the powertrain for Ram. And so what that means is if you want an EcoDiesel, you pretty much have to go in and order one right away. And we kind of got mixed signals from Ram when they announced this, because they talked up the EcoDiesel as if it's like the best powertrain ever. They're like, it's got tons of torque, 480 pound-feet of torque. You can get 1,000 miles of range on a tank of fuel because it gets over 30 miles per gallon on the interstate, and it has a 33-gallon fuel tank as an option. And then they're just like, yep, we're getting rid of it, which is just strange. They basically stated that electrification is the new focus, and so that's why they're getting rid of the EcoDiesel. I don't buy that, because they could release a hybrid version of the EcoDiesel, like a plug-in hybrid. That would be so popular because it would tow better than the current EcoDiesel. You would have better fuel economy, and it would have even more range. And if it had the plug-in application, right, that would help their overall like bottom line fuel economy number, and that would just give people so much utility with the powertrain. But they don't want to go down that road because, frankly, the truth is the EcoDiesel hasn't been all that popular. It was released for the 2014 model year, and it was initially pretty popular. But what people found out pretty quickly is that engine sucked at towing, especially compared to the 5.7 Hemi with a 3.92 axle ratio. It just didn't have all that much power to pull actual loads, and the overall towing capacity with the EcoDiesel is just lower compared to a Ram with a 5.7 Hemi. And so people were like, oh, well, I guess this isn't meant for towing, and so then that kind of decreased popularity. And then there were reliability issues with the EcoDiesel, and so then that also further decreased the popularity. And then on top of that, there was a emissions scandal with the EcoDiesel, and so then that further decreased the popularity because a bunch of people that had the trucks took it in to basically get a recall update to make it so these trucks were compliant with emissions, and it made it so the trucks got worse fuel economy and they felt so much less powerful. And so it just basically left a bitter taste in a lot of people's mouths, because when you think of diesel, you think reliability, towing capacity, and you don't really think about like emission scandals. And when the EcoDiesel had like all of those happen, where not good towing capacity, not necessarily the most reliable, and it had an emission scandal, yeah, people aren't really going to be going and wanting to purchase it, especially when it's a big upcharge on a Ram 1500. It's like almost $5,000 to add an EcoDiesel. And so what Ram did is, after that whole situation, they released a new version of the EcoDiesel, which frankly is actually really good. It's more reliable than the previous version. There's no emission scandals with it, and it has a higher towing capacity. Now, the 5.7 Hemi is still a better engine when it comes to towing, but the new EcoDiesel is a really strong tow engine. But it is a situation where it's a little bit too late. Like, the legacy of the EcoDiesel is kind of just stained at this point, and so people don't want anything to have to do with it. And it's kind of crazy because that is in stark contrast to what's happening with Chevy with their Duramax powertrain, because that powertrain is so popular that they are releasing a new version of it with more power and more torque, because they are just capitalizing on the excitement behind that powertrain. And what Chevy did right that Ram didn't do right is they released a powertrain that had solid torque figures right out of the get-go, because the EcoDiesel, when it was initially released, didn't have nearly as much torque as it has today. But on top of that, it had a solid towing capacity right out of the gate, similar to V8 counterparts within Chevy's lineup. And so the Duramax is actually like a really good powertrain to kind of compare to their other powertrains, because it can tow just as well as like their V8 options, for example. Whereas with Ram, it's like you're having to concede towing capacity if you go for the EcoDiesel. And then the biggest thing is reliability. This Duramax powertrain that Chevy has been shown to be really reliable, which is very important for diesel owners, because when people purchase a diesel truck, they're purchasing it with the thought that they're going to keep it for decades, even though that's not necessarily reality. That is what people are thinking in their minds. And so when they hear that a powertrain isn't that reliable and it's a diesel, they're like, yep, no, we're not going to go for this. And so, yeah, the EcoDiesel, you know, the concept is awesome. but the actual execution wasn't necessarily the best. And the thing that's sad is once Ram, executed properly with the EcoDiesel, where they released a version that was amazing, it was like a little bit too late. And so I think that's why Ram is actually getting rid of the EcoDiesels, not because they're focusing on electrification. It's frankly because nobody wants to buy it, because they would rather buy Chevy's diesel because they trust that powertrain. Even though a lot of people don't like Chevy's new truck, powertrains ultimately are the most important thing in a pickup truck as like a selling point for a lot of people. And so with that being said, I want you guys to let me know what you think about the EcoDiesel, if you happen to own one, or if you're going to now go and purchase one because they're going to be getting rid of it, or if you think that, yes, finally Ram is getting rid of the EcoDiesel powertrain. And I guess just your general thoughts on these small diesels. I think the concept is really cool, and I think that we should have more of it in the US. It's just that, execution, like I said, just has to be a little bit better. See ya.